Hello, lovelies. Welcome to the GraveTells podcast, pimping book boyfriends on GraveTells.com since 2010.
Give me some more, get on the floor, come on, keep dancing.
Hi there, I'm Sue, host of the GraveTells Romance podcast, and today I'm joined by Tamara Ford of Shelf Addiction. Tamara is a longtime book reviewer, blogger, and podcaster, and in this episode, we're talking about our favorite romance books right now. Welcome, Tamara, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Sue. Glad to be here.
So I started last time on your podcast. This is a two-part for you guys listening. So definitely check out Shelf Addiction to see part one of this, where we talked about our first 10 favorite romances. And in this podcast, we're going to be talking about another 10 favorite romances. And these are just sort of favorites of ours from all of our life, from any time. It doesn't have to be new this year or new last year. It can be like, you know, the oldies but goodies. Those are totally fine too. So let's start out with Tamara and see what your first choice is.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned oldies but goodies, because I have a oldie but goodie to kick things off with. And that is French Silk by Sandra Brown. Have you heard of that?
I haven't, but I love the name.
Okay, so Sandra Brown has been writing for decades, and I was first introduced to Sandra Brown back when I was in high school. I was reading my cousin's books. You know, she's 10 years older than me, and I was reading these sexy books. But French Silk was like one of the ones that have stuck with me forever and ever. It's like a kind of a traditional romance, like contemporary for that time. And even though it's been 20 years since that was published, you know, 20 plus years, it doesn't feel like it, you know, like when you look at the topics, what's happening with some side of suspense, it doesn't feel like, oh, this was the 90s, right?
Right.
So it's definitely really cool. So if you like some spice with some suspense along with your romance, you know, unlikely couple, it's kind of like the whole detective thing and someone being protected kind of thing. It's definitely fun. And it's definitely classic to me, because Sandra Brown wrote tons of books kind of in this genre.
So would you classify it as a romantic suspense?
Yes, but on the cusp. I mean, it's not something that I would definitely say it's full on romantic suspense, because there are some elements, but I know as Brown has written more and more books, she has kind of crossed over fully into romantic suspense. Okay. But I think this book kind of sits more in regular romance than suspense to me. And then she started to evolve after, you know, the 90s into full on romantic suspense.
Nice. That's my favorite kind of romantic suspense, is where it's not fully suspense. The focus is not the suspense, but the suspense is like a nice, delicious element that you get within the romance. So that sounds really fun.
Yeah. So check this out. So French Silk is the name of the leading character's lingerie company. So that gives you a look. Right?
Okay. I foresee some lingerie scenes in this book.
Oh, yeah. It's spicy, but not, you know, crazy. It's all good. It's wonderful. Okay. You know, definitely take it. You know, if you haven't tried Sandra Brown, I definitely recommend trying French Silk first.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. And the name Sandra Brown sounds super familiar, and I'm almost positive I have read something by her. And I'm probably going to kick myself later and be like, of course you have. You know you have. It's this book.
Yeah.
Readers are like, what's wrong with you? Yes, you have. So, okay, great. So since you were talking about spicy, I will go a little further, and it's sort of edgy. Actually, it's definitely edgy. This is Priest by Sierra Simone. And if you've never read anything by Sierra Simone, let me just warn you that you are in for a really hot ride. Her books are scorching hot, like scorching hot. And they push the boundaries of what we normally think of as like romance, right? So like she has one called Porn Star, which is a porn star romance that she did with Laurel and Page, which I loved. And in the Priest series, there's at least two of them in a novella. Well, there's one coming out. So there's Priest plus a novella, plus I think one more coming out. And it's actually about a Catholic priest. And they do some things that if you are Catholic, you might think, what's going on here? Because it's
really,
yeah, like sex on the altar. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding.
All right. Yes.
So
Okay.
spicy for sure. And the whole premise is Father Bell is sort of having this existential crisis, right? Like he loves God and he's a man of God and he is totally devoted to his faith and his profession as a priest. He loves his community. He's really made it a better place through being the priest of this parish. But this woman comes in and she's just like, she's it for him, right? Like that's it. There's this connection and it's like, she's the one. And what I love so much about this book is that it doesn't use the Catholic priest thing as like a trope. It's not just this sort of tossed in element to give it some spice. It's part of the thread of the emotion of the whole thing. There are scenes where you really feel like their God is with them. And it's just gorgeous and it made me cry and it was super hot. So if you are not opposed to things that might be a little offensive to some Catholics, depending on how you take your faith. Maybe give it a try. I don't know how to describe that.
So question, the priest, okay, I am not Catholic, so I don't know. So I think I know, but I'm not for sure. So the priests, they're not allowed to get married, right?
They're not allowed to have relationships. Their relationship is with God.
Okay, so they're the celibate ones.
Yeah.
Supposed to be
the celibate ones. Now he was, of course, not celibate before he became a priest. But once you dedicate your life to God, that is your life, and you sort of your entire life's focus is on God. And it's this, and the story does a great job of illustrating why that's appealing to some people. Because I'm also not Catholic, so I didn't really understand it. But as I was reading the story, I kept thinking, okay, I totally get it. Like I feel like I could be Catholic at this moment, which somebody who's actually Catholic is gonna be like, oh, you're a terrible person and don't ever say that again.
Oh, no.
But my point is that the way it's written is just authentic. It feels authentic, but it doesn't feel sacrilegious. And I think that's really important in case that is your religion and you're sensitive about those things. So maybe not for everybody, but if you're okay with that dynamic and that trope, man, it's fantastic. And spicy.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that's like, I've seen some Lifetime movies like that, where like the woman falls in love with the priest, and then of course he's no longer a priest. Yeah. But I've seen like movies like that, like romance movies on Lifetime. So I didn't even realize, or I didn't even connect the dots that that's like a trope in this genre, but I guess so. Yeah.
It's so hot. Okay. So here's a funny story about a friend of mine, Cheryl. Whenever she reads a book that's really hot, she puts it in the refrigerator.
That's awesome.
And even if it's her phone, like she's reading a Kindle book on her phone, she puts her phone in the refrigerator. And she put this book in the refrigerator multiple times.
Oh my gosh. So does she take a photo and show it in the refrigerator?
That would be really funny. She should do that, actually. I don't know if she has, but fun little tidbit about this particular book and Sierra Simone's works in general. She also does the new Camelot series, which is sort of a play on the author Guinevere Lancelot, thing. She said, I was on the 1001 Dark Nights cruise recently, and she was a guest there. And she mentioned that one of the Easter eggs she puts in all of her stories is she likes to put in elements like little references to her other characters. So she has, I mentioned Porn Star earlier with Llewellyn Page that she wrote. The porn star there is Logan O'Toole. And so most of her books have this reference to Logan O'Toole porn. Like all the guys watch Logan O'Toole porn.
Oh, wow.
Which is hilarious because I love that book too. Anyway, that's Priest by Sierra Simone.
Cool. Well, okay. I would love to keep up on the spice level issue, but I cannot. I know. I'm actually going to change gears a little bit. My next book is called It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. And it falls under contemporary romance. And it's really an honest truth about relationships that you get to read in this book. And that's the good, the bad, the ugly. So this isn't your typical romance. Some say it's not a romance, but it definitely is shelved as a romance. It starts, you know how you have these fairy tale relationships. It starts out great and kind of turns a little left.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this book is, but it doesn't turn into like a thriller or anything. It's really just what happens in these kind of relationships, growing, learning from your past, learning from your mistakes. And it really is sweet for the main character. as she starts to, I guess, sort her life out, right? So it is a romance, but not in a predictable way. So this definitely deviates from the classic notions of what a romance is. So don't get it twisted. Don't read it thinking, oh, it's going to be this great romantic love, but it's not. But it's still an amazing book. And there are a lot of romantic elements, especially like in the first, I don't know, 30% of the book. And then it ends with some in an unexpected way. So I definitely love it.
So does it start with them as an existing couple, or do they get together in the beginning of it?
No, actually, she meets him at the beginning, and she kind of tells the story of, the story of them. And also we get to see bits of her past, of this past relationship she had in high school. So we get to kind of see like the differences of like her two types of experiences in relationships. And she meets him and he's a doctor and he's dashing and he's all of this. So they meet and fall in love, fall hard, fall fast. And it's just a roller coaster right after that. But I really loved how it ended. And even though it's not, a technical, feel good romance, it's one that I read in 2016 and I have yet to forget it. It just stuck with me. It stuck with me for the long haul. I recommend this to everyone.
And this is called This Is Us?
It's called It Ends With Us.
Ends With Us. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, that reminds me, there's like this sort of uncelebrated, I don't even want to call it a subgenre type of romance that is very flowy and lifelike. It's not dramatic. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have the 3-act structure. And by 3-act structure, I mean, they meet, they get together, they start forming this great relationship, something bad happens and they get back together, right? That's the 3 acts. But
oh yeah, no.
have that, right? And it sounds like this is not one of those. So some of them just follow a normal life pattern and they just sort of tell a story of people, while there's also love and romance involved. So it sounds like it kind of might be one of those.
Yes. And that's one of the things I loved about it, is that it's so realistic and it gave you a good perspective on certain types of relationships, that I think every woman should read. You don't have to you don't have to kiss and make up. You don't have to, those rules don't apply all the time.
Yeah.
So this was like, and it put it in a perspective that is in a way that's digestible. It's not like, it's not something that would have triggers, I don't think, for a lot of people, because Hoover does a great way. She does a good job of kind of like, she'll get you right to that line, but won't push you over it. So, so people who are sensitive to certain types of things, I think you'll be okay. But, it's really an excellently told story.
Okay. Wow. Great to know, because that's pretty much different than anything else I have on my list. So I love that we're getting this dichotomy of views here. So the next one I want to talk about is it's actually parallel. It's very similar to 50 Shades of Grey. Now I say that knowing that some people are going to turn off the podcast right now because 50 Shades has sort of this there's this love-hate relationship in the romance community. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people have never read it, but hate it anyway. I personally have positive affiliations with 50 Shades. I've met some of my best friends through waiting in line for the midnight releases, and previous to that through Twilight, which is what 50 Shades was. It was fan fiction for Twilight. So I have a positive affiliation for 50 Shades, even though the writing is not stellar. Yes, it's not the best. But this is called How to Bang a Billionaire. It's by Alexis Hall. I love the title, right? And it's a trilogy. The second one is called How to Blow It with a Millionaire or Billionaire. And then there's one more coming out later this year. But I don't know the title of that one. But the main character is named Arden St. Ives, which is the best name. I just love that name.
I like Arden. It's nice.
And he sort of tells the story in its first person, past tense, I believe, which will make some people happy. Some readers just hate present tense, like hate it, but it's not in present tense. I'm pretty sure it's in past tense. So Arden calls himself the man least likely to set the world on fire. So he sort of doesn't have a lot of self-confidence. He doesn't really know where he's going. He's attending Oxford. He's in his final year. And the way he meets Caspian Hart, who's the billionaire, is his roommate is sick, and his roommate's one of those like, do all the things, volunteer for all the things guys. And his roommate is sick and he can't talk. And so, Arden takes over his phone job for the night, which is basically trying to solicit donations from the past students of Oxford. And so he ends up having to call Caspian, and the last 3 calls he's gotten hung up on, and he's so frustrated that he's doing a terrible job that he just sort of blurts out, I'm Martin Sadow's, please don't hang up on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so of course Caspian talks to him, and they have this great rapport. And the whole first book is about them sort of getting together as a couple. And just like with 50 Shades, Caspian is sort of a emotionally unavailable character. He's one of those untouchable billionaire CEOs whose work is his life. He doesn't have friends. He doesn't have romantic relationships, and he's into BDSM. There's kind of a theme here. I know that, like, if you listen to the first podcast, in this series, Tamara and I talked a little bit about BDSM and how it's really not your thing. And I'm a little kinkier, so
I don't want to seem like a wuss or like a school marm, because I'm not.
You're not. But I keep pulling out these really kinky stories, and you're like, oh, but I can't. So this one's not on that level. So this is not Vampire Queen or Frank and Tom level of kinkiness. This is like 50 Shades of Grey kinkiness. Okay. So if you can handle 50 Shades of Grey, you can handle this.
Yeah, it was fine.
What I really liked about it is that it's similar to 50. It has that same progression of a relationship that, the unavailable guy that you want to save, but it also, the main character is so relatable and he's so likable. Like Arden is the best. I love him. If he was a real life character, I would want to be his bestie.
Really? Well, that's cool that he's likable, because I don't remember liking, Christian Grey. I didn't like him.
Yeah, well, Christian is sort of the Caspian parallel here, but even Caspian is more likable than Christian Grey.
Okay.
I think Anna, is that her name? I'm sorry, 50 Shades fans. The heroine of 50 Shades. She's similar in some ways to Arden, but I feel like he's a lot more relatable, and he's just fun. He's just fun.
Okay, and so he's not a total pushover.
No,
either.
He's not. He definitely has spine, but it comes out in these sort of moments where you push him to an edge, and he's like, "That's it, I'm done." And I really respect that, because it makes for some gorgeous emotional moments.
Okay, I'll bite.
Okay, so that was my second one. What you got next?
Okay, so my next one is actually fantasy, and it is, I guess it's in that new adult realm. Is new adult still a thing? Are they trying to get rid of that? I don't even know.
Even if they get rid of it as a genre, it still exists. I mean, it is what it is,
Yeah, so they're young adults, basically. They're adults, but they're young, in their early 20s. And it's called White Hot Kiss by Jennifer L. Armentrout. And it is a series called The Dark Elements. I think it was 5 books, and I blasted through these 5 books in 1 week. It was so good. And it's about angels and demons, basically. It's very unique. And it's like this struggle between this girl who finds out she's like half demon, half angel. And like, she's always hunted demons. And then she falls for the biggest demon of them all, like the son of the devil.
Nice.
It's awesome. And like, their relationship is just like, wow. And it's, he just says the right things. He's got the right moves, but then she's got this other guy that, is kind of like a threesome kind of situation, sort of. But the guy never has a chance. Not really. The other
like
guy,
a love triangle.
Yeah, love triangle, but not really, because, kind of like the whole Twilight thing. While there was a love triangle, there really wasn't.
Right. Yeah. There was no chance.
So, yeah, there's no chance. But I love them together. It's a very exciting, fun read. It's got lots of twists. It's got a little bit of darkness to it, because obviously there is going to be some darkness where you're talking about angels and demons and, the son of the devil. So it's definitely not in a comical, cartoony way. It's real. Like, it feels real sometimes, like, oh no, this is some serious stuff. And you get like, oh no, what's happening to these characters? My beloved characters. No, don't do this and don't do that. I get real into it, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But it's great. Definitely check out White Hot Kiss by Jennifer L. Armentrout. She really knows how to make a tortured hero. She really does.
I love the tortured heroes. I love them.
Yeah.
So is this the first in the series? Okay,
yes.
Good, great. So you can just start it and you don't have to worry about anything that happened in the past.
Right. Start with White Hot Kiss, and it's just amazing. Amazeballs.
Fantastic. I'm totally putting that on my list, because I like Jennifer Armentrout. So, And I love angel demon stories, especially the tortured heroes and the son of the devil. That's like sort of the prince, right? It's like the prince of hell kind of thing.
Yes.
Which is fantastic. Prince stories are the best. When they're not terrible Lifetime movies, I should just throw that out there.
Right.
Oh, there's it's Netflix. Sorry, Lifetime. It's Netflix. Have you seen A Christmas Prince?
No, I haven't
It's terrible.
seen it.
Like just straight up terrible. Bad.
Oh,
It's bad.
Duly noted. When I see that pop up on Netflix, I'll just skip it.
The reason I watched it, and this is totally off topic, like I knew it was going to happen. But anyway, the reason I watched it is because during the holiday season, they had all these Prince romances on it. And I love Prince romances. It was right after, Prince Harry had gotten engaged and there was sort of this whole, fantastical feeling of the royalty, right? And so my friend says, oh, there's this one that people have been talking about on Twitter that it's so bad that it's good. Like it's so bad, it's good. Let's watch that. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm game. Let's have some drinks and watch this so bad it's good movie. No, it's not so bad it's good. It's just bad. It's just bad.
Just bad.
Don't watch it. I want those hours of my life back. Actually.
Thank you for the warning. I appreciate that greatly.
It actually, I wrote a blog post about it. I really disliked it so much. Anyway.
Ouch.
Yeah. So anyway, enough about that. So similar to princes are kind of dukes, right? Because dukes are next down in the chain of royalty. So let's talk about A Duke in the Night by Kelly Bowen. This is a Regency romance. I've kind of had this love for Regency lately, which is new for me because I used to love Regency way back in the day. It's one of the first things I read when I found romance and then devoured it for the rest of my life after that. But I sort of got put off because I read so much of it in this, compressed time frame. So then recently I have been reading more Regency, and this is one of the stories that just sticks with you. A Duke in the Night by Kelly Bowen. I love the setup of this. It's, this Duke, the Duke of Dover, who's a scoundrel and a titan of business. His name is August Faulkner. And then Clara Hayward, who is the headmistress of the Haverhall School for Young Ladies. So we have a Duke, this like wild rake, this guy who's like all about business and taking over and the ladies. And then we have this very buttoned up, very career focused young woman, Clara. And there's other things in the story that sort of pit them against each other as enemies, even things that she doesn't know about until later. And the emotional arc in this is just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And one of the things I loved about him was that his character is intense. It's kind of hard to write. I think it's difficult to write an intense character and really have that come across on page. And Kelly Bowen does a fantastic job of making you feel the power, the command, the gravitas that this guy just exudes. And her and the relationship she has to him and his sensitivity to her, it's just gorgeous. She's very progressive as well. Whenever I read Regencies, I like them to be progressive because I'm not into the whole, oh, come save me, dynamic. These are heroines who want to save themselves and who are capable of saving themselves, and they're spitfires. And it's just fantastic. I think it comes out very soon this month in February. So by the time this airs, it might already be live.
Oh, I love that because I love strong heroines. I really cannot stand the weaklings who just can't do anything without the hero, just doing everything, saving them and crying. And I just can't take it. I can't.
We don't want to be saved. We want a partner so that we can work together. Yeah. It's like, ugh.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay. Well, definitely. I think I will add that to my list because it sounds great.
It's fantastic.
Awesome. Okay. So my next one is I'm going to stick with fantasy. I recently reread all the books in this series for a read along I did over on Shelf Addiction, but it is the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs.
Yes.
This is another one that I just love to death. I just love Mercy and Adam. They are my favorite besides Cat and Bones. I love them. And it's werewolves and fae and vampires. And it's just a mesh ghost. It's a mesh of things going on in Mercy Thompson's world.
So Mercy Thompson is a little bit more slow burn. than Night Huntress. So if you are sensitive to that slow burn, urban fantasy, that's something to keep in mind. But I love, the how vivid the story world is on this series. And it also has a great comic. Have you seen the graphic novels for this?
I did take a peek, but I did not, invest the time in reading it because I kind of don't like graphic novels that much. But I mean, I really liked how it looked.
It has a really neat look. And it's similar to the Laurel K. Hamilton, Anita Blake vampire hunter ones. Those have like a flashier cover design, but they have this like kind of artsy yet, I don't know. I don't want to say violence, not the right word. They have a really distinct style in the artistry, and it tells a story more quickly. So I like that because I'm not a fan of the slow burns type series, because in Night Huntress, they get together, like almost immediately they get together, right?
Yeah. I think that the first book, they didn't get together at all. I think it was the second book, I think, when Mercy and Adam got together. So. But they had strong chemistry from pretty much the first time they were together. And it seemed like at first there was going to be this triangle thing going on, but the author quickly smashed that because it was ridiculous. So,
yeah.
So it's like, so I'm like, thank goodness. But just let me say, you guys, if you haven't read the Mercy Thompson series and you have read the one, what was the one by Laura K. Hamilton?
Anita Blake,
Anita Blake, yes. I did read the first couple books in the Anita Blake, and I had to put them down. These are not like, I mean, if you're talking about the graphic novel, that might be one thing visually, but the stories are nothing.
Agreed.
I mean, they're totally separate. So don't think it's going to be similar, because it's not. Thank God, because I hated that other
Mercy
series.
Thompson is pretty classic urban fantasy. Mercy Thompson. It's pretty classic urban fantasy. And if you are a fan of urban fantasy where the focus is not the romance, but the focus is the adventure and the characters, then it's one of the classics. Like, people love it.
Yeah. But you know what, though? Ironically, I don't know if you've read to the end. Are you caught up on that series?
I stopped at like 3, I think, because I don't like the slow burn. Like, I like to focus on the romance. I'm a romantic, right? Like, give me all the romance. And they were taking forever to unroll the romance.
Yeah, it's definitely a romance light, but I feel like as you get further into the series, they don't dance around that shouldn't we get together thing forever. I mean, they bond, they mate, and then it's a different kind of story. The sex scenes between them are really spicy, but not in like a BDSM kind of way or pushing the limits kind of way. It's kind of tame, but it's definitely got a little kick to it. And I feel like as the relationship between them transforms as the series goes longer. So in that regard, you are right. It is a slow burn. And if that bothers you, you don't like that, then this probably isn't for you. But if you don't mind them not hooking up like right away, then I think that the payoff of what their relationship becomes, like, they are a power couple by the time you get into book 4 and 5. It's kind of like, wow, they're amazing.
That's
together.
really good to hear. It's interesting too. There's another series by Ilona Andrews that has the same dynamic, from what I understand, that I also haven't read, but I really want to with my crazy long TBR. So question about the Mercy series. As you go on in the books, are the stories of the books based on around the couple, or are they like these external events that the couple just responds to?
Yeah, they're external. Well, both.
Okay.
Mostly it's external, like things happen to their pack or in their area and they have to deal with it. But then Mercy is like thrown into the middle because of people that she knows. And it's like a lot of Adam trying to save Mercy from herself because she has to save everyone else. So it's a lot of that going on.
Okay.
But then they do have their own conflict because, Adam, he's the lead of a pack. He's the top. He's an alpha. And, he has to work with someone who is not in the pack structure. She is not a wolf. Right. She's a coyote. So, she operates differently, and they have that push-pull going on where he wants to try to control her like he does the rest of the pack. And she's like, I don't know what the hell you're trying to do, but that's not what's happening.
Nice. I like that she pushes back. That's good to know. Good to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that. Yeah.
And just a clarification, we talked about Anita Blake. You were absolutely right. It is not a paranormal romance. It's that series is very long, and I think probably around book 8-ish. I'm kind of guesstimating there. It switches from horror because the first several books are straight horror. There are paranormal elements, but it's essentially like urban fantasy horror mashup. And then it switches over to erotica. So there's very little, and at that point she's a succubus, and the entire thing is like there's multi menages in every multiple people scenes that are like kind of crazy, and it gets repetitive. So there's less storyline after book 8 when she becomes a succubus. And then if you like horror, it's very gory and very terrifying actually in the first 8 books.
Yeah, I mean with Anita Blake, I should go back. Maybe I read 4 books. 4 or 5. I don't know. All I know is I started feeling really bad for Richard. I remember him. He's the wolf. And I mean, I'm like, why are you constantly sleeping with this vampire? That's gross. And then I'm like, okay, so then obviously they're starting to have this triangle thing. I'm like, oh God, here we go. It's starting. I'm like,
well,
no.
Then there's another triangle. She creates another triangle. There's 2 that she's part of, and it gets kind of complicated. And it's sexy in that physical way. So if you're like a voyeur and you like to read erotica and sexy scenes, then read the second half of the series. But the first half is based on real events, not real paranormal events, but real police case files. And so there's some really gross stuff in there, and bathtubs of body parts. I mean, things that gave me nightmares. So if you are sensitive to imagery, that is not the series for you. Anyway.
Nope.
Anyhow, let's talk about romance. Okay. Gosh. So I have some choices here. Should I talk about pirates or should I talk about vampires? I'm going to talk about.
Oh, I'm going to always pick vampires, honestly.
I kind of feel like we just talked about vampires, even though we didn't really talk about vampires, but I did talk about the Vampire Queen series on the first half of this podcast that you should watch or listen to on Shelf Addiction. So I'm going to save the vampire and maybe be a bonus. Let's talk about pirates. Okay. So my next one is called Kidnapped by the Pirate. It's by Kiera Andrews. This is a historical gay romance. It's a May-December, which means one of the characters is significantly older than the other one. Not grandpa old, which is kind of what that sometimes implies, but kind of young, inexperienced guy and guy in his 40s or something like that. Or whatever the equivalent of the 40s was in the pirate time, because they didn't live as long then. And it has some power exchange dynamic. So it's not heavy BDSM, but one of the guys is definitely a bottom, and that's what he craves. So it's Nathaniel Bainbridge and Captain Hawk. And Nathaniel is sort of this son of a nobleman who has squandered all of his money. And so he's using Nathaniel in this sort of power game to marry him off to some heiress so that he can get more money to, probably squander. And Captain Hook is, Hawk. Wow, that was interesting slip. Captain Hawk is a pirate who has this sort of reputation that isn't completely earned. He's definitely legitimately a pirate. So unlike some people who say they're pirates but don't really do pirate things, he actually does pirate things. But he's also kind of a good guy. He doesn't want to do that. He's inflated his reputation so that he's scary, but he doesn't actually have to do the things. His crew is legit pirates. Basically the story is of Captain Hawk wanting to settle down and Nathaniel wanting to get away from his father. And they have this connection because Captain Hawk abducts him for ransom money, which of course the father can't pay. Right. So I didn't expect it to end the way it ended. It has a happily ever after. But I love the twist that in the end, and I love the way they live together in the end. And I loved the scenes, the power exchange scenes were just beautifully done. And of course it's the pirate trope. It's the captive trope, which is always really fun.
Yeah, it can be totally. Cool. I like it. It's funny. I recently read a pirate book. I think, what was it called? I can't even think of the name right this minute, but I don't usually read about pirates either. That's something that's a little unusual for me, but something said, pick this book up and it was amazing. I really liked it. I'm like, oh, it's so good. And that's not something I would normally gravitate toward. So yeah, I like it. It's definitely different. I'm glad you chose the pirate
Pirates
route.
are just fun. They're just fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think this is my last one, right?
Almost done.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to go back into like the new adults age range. And this is 10 Teeny Breaths by K.A. Tucker. And it's amazing. It's amazing. It's a very unique story about this woman, Casey. They're in college, and this guy, Trent, and they meet, and she has lots of secrets. She has a little bit of PTSD from her past. She's taking care of her little sister. They kind of ran away from home, and he has his own set of secrets. But they kind of fall hard and fast for each other, and he's very, he makes up all the parts of the perfect book boyfriend, right? The perfect smile. He says the right things. It's all amazing. And they kind of have this unique love story, but it's kind of codependent. So it's a little unhealthy. And it kind of, I always like to have some edge to this stuff. It's like, it can't just be typical. So, yeah. So it kind of snowballs and some things happen, but you root for this couple in the end. And I really like the characters, even though the girl has PTSD. She's a strong heroine, which I always love. And because of that, they kind of butt heads a little bit, but I really like the chemistry. I like the writing, and it turns into this series. We get to learn more about the secondary characters. This is a true romance, and it's different, so it's not overly mushy, but the sex scenes are pretty good. Cause, again, Tucker is hot. Tucker is very hot. So that's always a good thing, but yeah, it's different,
so
but I
what
love
is her
it. Definitely
PTSD
check that
from?
one out. Well, her childhood was pretty rough. She ended up running away from home, and then she found out that I think it was her uncle or someone did something to her sister. So she yanked her sister away and they ran. So they had some abuse going on in their home. Okay, and so that's why they ran away.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely kind of a bad past. And, because of that, she doesn't like to kind of, she doesn't trust people easily. Totally. Rightfully so.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So one more. I have one more. So I have two left on my list. I think I'm going to go with the vampire here because I don't feel like I've talked about vampires very much, and they were sort of my first love when I started blogging. So if you go back to the way early days of GraveTells, you'll see Twilight is on there a whole lot, but I also had Cat and Bones, Night Huntress, which we talked about in the last podcast, which is always so much fun to talk about. And of course, the True Blood books, which are not called True Blood, Sookie Stackhouse. So I have this great love for vampires. So I want to talk about Rebecca Zanetti's Dark Protector series, but I'm not going to start with book one because my favorite couple, even today, even after the series ended and is actually going to get a reboot, which I'm totally excited about. So excited. But that's for later. So even after the series ended, number 3 is still my favorite, and it's Hunted. And it's the story of Maura Dunn, who is a witch, and she's Irish. I love that they're Irish because the accent totally comes through. And the thing about the witches in this universe is that they're smart. It's like smart magic. So it's quantum physics based. So it's not that, yes, they are born with magic abilities, but it's not that they're just like, oh, poof, I'm going to wave my wand and cast a spell. They actually have to understand quantum physics. They study science for hundreds of years to be good at what they do. And I really appreciate that attention to detail, scientifically. So
let me ask you a question. Is this the series that prompted the spinoff of Realm Enforcers? Okay, because I'm reading Realm Enforcers now, and I kind of wish I had started with the first series.
It's really good.
But that sounds really good. I'm like,
you should go back and check it out. And you can start from the beginning, but you don't have to. I started on book 3 because that's what the publisher sent me. I'd never heard of it. And I was like, oh, this looks fun. I'll try it. Because Khan is like a super soldier. He's like the realm's best soldier. He's almost unkillable. And the things she puts him through, that Miss Zanetti puts him through, are pretty incredible. This guy survives some crazy, crazy things. But together as a couple, I just love them. They have this push-pull dynamic where they're always bickering, but they can't stay away from each other. And there's 100 years of enforced time apart because she was very young when they mated originally. Because the Karis men, who were the vampire royalty, in this world. When they mate with someone, it's not voluntary necessarily. Like they get this brand on their hand and the brand transfers to their mate. And then over time, they develop shared characteristics. So he can do some magic, and then she also becomes a little bit more hardy in the super soldier kind of way. And so he has to leave her for 100 years so that she can develop as a witch. And so this story starts when he goes back to collect her. And then, of course, there's other things happening that are part of the greater series plot. And I fell in love with the series because of these characters. And it's still to this day one of my favorite, even though I always talk about it when I talk about vampires. Well, folks, that's the end of today's podcast. We actually had about 15 minutes more audio, but the quality was just not what I needed to be. You probably heard at the end of this episode where we started sort of talking over each other. We weren't actually talking over each other. That was just the way we recorded. So apologies for that. We do have some bonus recommendations for you, and I'm going to put those on GraveTells.com. So go check those out, and you'll also see buy links for all of the books that I recommended, as well as everything Tamara recommended. And you can see the link to the podcast for the first episode of this 2-part series. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you will come check out my book recommendations on GraveTells.com, and be sure to check out Shelf Addiction for her podcast and book recommendations as well. And I'll see you next time on GraveTells.